All right, here we go. We are going to show you some different ways of masking and making things go back to the paper in a sense. So if you think of masking, you can think of masking tape, like the tape on the edge of your paper. If you were to paint right up to that masking tape, and then when you peel the masking tape off, it's going to leave a nice clean edge. So I put a little piece of blue tape right there, and all you would do, literally, is just kind of paint right over it. Let that dry, and then after that dries, I'm going to just peel it off here. This one's already dry, and you let it go back to the white of the paper. So I have this, I'll show you this in a few minutes. If I had something like this and I wanted to put a piece of tape over that, then paint over the top of that, I would peel that off and it would go back to the original color here. So it doesn't have to be on blank paper. You can do that technique on a layer of color already. But I can't touch that during this video because it's going to be too wet. Another thing to do, something that you do more often, you don't usually have a place for masking tape, but that's just the idea. If by chance you have a piece of masking tape that you can cut in the right shape, put it in the right place, and you need to paint around it, that's great. Here's the other one, Frisket. Frisket is a masking fluid. And these, you can barely see this little pinkish line and that right in there as well. And it comes in this little container. I don't want to tip it over too far because it might leak because it's like rubber cement in a liquid form. This is called Misket, that's the brand, but it's a Frisket. It's a masking fluid. And what it is, or what you need to do when you first get it, you have to get a paper towel around the top and give it a good shaking, because the paper towel will help keep it from leaking. And if it does happen to leak out a little bit, then you're preventing a mess. Sometimes it gets really hard to open, so I put this rubber band around the lid so I could open it easier, but I opened it a little while ago. A few things about Frisket. It smells really bad, and it's this light pink orangey kind of color. It just smells horrible. Also, Frisket will ruin brushes. There's a way to do it with some soapy water, but I've done that before, but it kind of thins it out. It'll just ruin this brush completely. So we have a few brushes dedicated just to apply Frisket. So all it is, things like whiskers, little hairs that you need to paint around, so you don't have to literally paint around them. You can just paint right over them and then peel the Frisket off. So I'm not going to paint over this, but it's just as simple as just kind of painting it right where you need to do something. You could think of it as if this were an eye and you wanted to paint that reflection in the eye, leave it the white of the paper, you could just do that and then later peel off the Frisket and it goes back to the white of the paper. And I can show you how that works. Let me clean that off just a little bit. Another thing about Frisket, as I'm getting myself put together here, is you may not blow dry your watercolor when there's Frisket on the paper. It needs to dry all by itself, and it takes a good 15-20 minutes. It will still feel even sticky a little bit. And I have some right down here, so I'm just going to paint. I'll get some purple. I'm just going to paint right over it, and you can kind of see. I'll put some blue in there too. Maybe you can see it better. You can see it's just kind of resisting. There's falling off of where the Frisket is. Okay, that's all there is to that. You just paint right over it, and it does not allow the paint to go down to the paper. Now, this I did a while ago when it's already dried. I did not blow dry it. You have to take your finger. Sometimes it helps to, if you have a small bit, maybe an eraser to start it, kind of that sticky stuff. And you can see it coming back to the white of the paper right there. I'll even get a little closer. I'm doing this all pretty small so it doesn't take long. So you carefully just kind of peel that off, and then it's right back to the white of the paper. And there's some little dots here that you can peel off. You can do it with a dry fingertip too. And a fingertip that does not have a bunch of like lotions and sticky stuff on it. See that? There's those white dots. And I'll take off this last one too. You don't want to keep Triscuit on for days and days and days. Hopefully you put it on, you paint, the class may end, and then you have to take the Triscuit off the next day. That's fine. All right, those are a couple of those. So again, you can think if it was cat's whiskers, anything, little fur at the edge of an animal, if you didn't want to get paint in there, and leave those the white of the paper, that'd be great. Another few tools that we have are crayons and oil pastels. Okay, so I just did a little smear, and I'll just do one right here. You have to push kind of hard with the white crayon. And this is something that's going to be kind of irregular. Okay, you can't get it as clean as you can with Triscuit. The other drawback is you cannot paint back into this. Here it goes back to the white of the paper. If I wanted to make that, like a color inside there, I could just kind of carefully paint in there. So, and here you can again see how the paint just falls right off of where the crayon is. But it's not as predictable. So I'm going to wipe off my brush, and I'm going to pick up some of the little water droplets on the crayon. It also does not quite go back to the white of the paper. It's not quite as brilliant white, so you have to know your limitations. But it definitely has a lighter tone. Again, I could do white crayon over the top of this blue and then paint over it, and it would have that, it would have a slightly different feel there. So white oil pastel, same thing. I'm just going to kind of do a couple little wigglies. I'm pressing kind of hard. And then let's put some paint over that one too. I'll use some green this time. Just going to paint right over it, and you see it just fall right off. So if you have kind of an irregular surface that you want to be pretty light right off the bat. But again, if I try to go in there and paint on top of where that was, it's not going to stick. That's a permanent masking. It's permanent. Like, remember my original masking, I can paint back into that just fine. All right, there's one more. We can take clean water, absolutely clean water. Hopefully this works enough for you to see it. And it's more subtle. So I'm just going to brush some clean water right there. And what happens is that water starts to soak into the paper, and it kind of lifts the pigment out of the paper. And then you're going to take, so I just kind of let it scrub in there, maybe 30 seconds. Just let it soak in a little bit. And if I want, to make it come out more, I take a dry part of a paper towel and I just blot it. Just push down and push back up, and you can see it took some off of that area. If you want to, you can try to take off, a little more. The first time you do it is probably about as much it's going to happen, but this might take off a little bit more. Then you can go right up to it, and if you needed to paint darker around it to make it appear lighter, you could totally do that. So that's a way to affect how dark and light things get. All right, that's the end of that little video. That's a different way to kind of mask off some places and control your watercolor painting.